All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our Eco Working Group meeting. Just a reminder that we are recording this. So, and I believe do we post this on our site? Okay.
Yeah.
And then we'll post it to the site later. And before we get started, I just wanted to welcome Jennifer Laszlo, I'm going to say it wrong, Ms. Rahi? Ms. Rahi? Is that correct?
Yes.
She just recently a brand new member of the Climate Change Commission. She's a commissioner and was appointed just last week or last month. So she's chosen to join our group and see what we're up to. So just welcome, Jennifer. We are a small but mighty group. We work hard, and we have lots of Jabari.
I didn't do that. I'm sorry.
What?
I was trying to get the clapping symbol. I apologize.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So we have a great work plan for this year, which we're going to talk about a few of those topics later on. But first, Jabari is going to introduce our guest speaker for today.
Thank you, Amy. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, we're going to actually get straight into our meeting agenda, and we have an incredible guest speaker with us today, Ms. Karen Florini. And I'll just give you a little bit about her. Ms. Florini, she's the Vice President for Strategic Impact at Climate Central, where her roles include strategic engagement with key non-media audiences, including NGOs, governments, educators, and businesses. She also leads Climate Central's work on climate and health issues. From April 2015 through January 2017, Florini served as Deputy Special Envoy for Climate Change at the U.S. Department of State. In that capacity, she helped lead the Global Climate Change Initiative, a whole-of-government mechanism for integrating climate change into foreign assistance. She also led the State Department's engagement with businesses, state and local governments, and civil society in the climate negotiations context. In addition, she headed the State Department's portfolio on short-lived climate pollutants, which included overseeing U.S. participation in the multilateral Climate and Clean Air Coalition, co-chairing the coalition's oil and gas methane partnership, and chairing the Arctic Council's expert group on black carbon and methane. Previously, Florini spent more than 25 years at Environmental Defense Fund, where among other responsibilities, she was managing director for international climate and led the environmental health program. Her combined 30+ years of service on nonprofit boards included 18 years as a trustee of Oberlin College, and she earned a bachelor's degree with her majors in biology and environmental policy at Oberlin and a JD at Harvard Law School, where she was editor-in-chief of the Harvard Environmental Law Review. So now I also want to thank Susan for finding this incredible person. And so now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Karen Florini so that you can present.
Thanks, and Jabari, I don't know where you found the long version of my little bio blurb, but I hope we didn't put you all to sleep with all of those details. I really am very glad to be here this afternoon, to be speaking with you all, and to be sharing some of the work that Climate Central does. The title of what I'm going to go through is Making It Local, Making It Real, and these are the free climate communication tools from Climate Central that are very much available to all of you. So just a little bit about us, and I promise this is the only one that I'm going to provide that has lots of bullets on it. But just a little bit of who Climate Central is. Climate Science Research and Communications nonprofit organization. Unlike most NGOs in the climate space, we're not an advocacy group. We never take positions on particular policies or technologies. Sometimes we report on them, but that's not, but reporting on solar power isn't any more advocating for solar power than when we report on hurricanes, we're not advocating for hurricanes. So we're essentially a business-to-business group in that we help climate communicators in government, civil society, education, and business communicate with their audiences and stakeholders as efficiently and effectively as possible. And unlike most B2B organizations, our stuff is free. Overall, we're working to make climate communications that are accurate. We're a science-based organization. It's a touchstone of everything we do. Effective by working to provide the materials to the people who can use them to communicate directly with their key audiences, and as widespread and ubiquitous as possible. It's all about building public will to engage on climate issues. And our tools take into account research that shows that you have to keep saying the facts again and again and again and again and again, both in order to connect the dots between climate change and both impacts and solutions, and to help counter a lot of the misinformation and disinformation on climate that's out there continually being circulated. All right, so with that as a quick background, I'm gonna go into our key tools and programs that I think you can use. One of the first and foremost is Climate Matters. Every week we send a Climate Matters bulletin that contains production-ready graphics to meteorologists, to journalists, to NGOs, and other climate communicators. The graphics are ready for on-air use, for use print digital, and use on social media. All of them are in Spanish as well as English. We launched Climate Matters back in 2012, focusing on local TV meteorologists because research showed that they're very trusted messengers. And then we've expanded it to include all beats and all media, as well as NGOs and businesses and governments, etc. So most week, the graphics are localized to media markets, and we regularly produce for these three in Maryland, which these three together cover basically the whole state, along with the broadcasts from DC for suburban Maryland. So what goes out every week is typically key to what's happening overall in the country. So in the summer, we're basically talking about heat in any of a variety of ways. And it's not just the trends to date, it's also projections for the future. We'll also talk about deluges, intense precipitation, or lack of precipitation leading to drought. But it's not just the weather, not just the temperature, and not just the precipitation, it's their impacts. Worse air quality, urban hotspots, more icky bugs, and worse allergies. So in addition to the localized graphic, we'll generally have a national one and an explainer graphic, as well as short bullets of the key concepts with links. To help reporters, we also list experts, and there's always a methodology section. And when we have more to say than on a particular topic, then we'll fit into one of the short weekly bulletins. We'll release an accompanying report, again, primarily using lay language with graphics, but some additional data as well. That's usually around 10 pages. We do that, it varies, but roughly every 6 weeks to 2 months. We've got graphics that show the basics, like the relationship between temperature and carbon dioxide, and some more advanced topics like the role of methane. It's another important heat-trapping gas that's actually 80 times more powerful than carbon dioxide in the first 20 years after it's released. This is my personal favorite of all of our explainer graphics. It makes clear how a very small change in average temperature has a huge impact on the extremes. And then it's the extremes, of course, that drive the impacts that are of the biggest concern. More and more, we are shifting our attention and our work to focus not only on impacts, but also on solutions, trying to focus on things that people directly care about, even if they're not that attuned to climate per se. So like talking about healthcare and healthcare costs, home budgets through energy costs, and jobs for renewable energy and so forth. We'll also emphasize the kinds of emissions that come from particular states. So in Maryland, it's primarily the biggest emitting source is buildings, followed by electricity and then industry. But the biggest one of all is transport. And then what those transportation emissions come from, and a little bit of information on climate solutions that can reduce those emissions. All of this material is available for free to anyone. Just go to the resources tab on our website at climatecentral.org. You can look for individual cities and towns by state, or you can just scroll through the information over. Another tool that we have, speaking of solutions, is our Weather Power tool. It compiles all of the available information on installed capacity for wind and solar throughout the United States. Then it combines it with yesterday's actual weather data and today's and tomorrow's forecast, and crunches the numbers to show the amount of electricity that's being generated in that location. This is available by state, by county, by media market, or by congressional district. And because most folks don't think in terms of megawatt hours, it provides equivalencies like homes powered or home energy savings. The online interface, again, allows you to select the location and then choose which graphic you want, which language you want, and which of the equivalencies that you want to select. My personal favorite is smartphones charged. It doesn't take a lot of juice to charge a smartphone, so you can get some nice big numbers, which are kind of fun. Our climate shift index is designed to help people understand that they are being impacted by climate change. Pretty much everyone in the world has already been impacted by climate change, whether that's something they've recognized or not. The Climate Shift Index quantifies the fingerprint of climate change on temperature everywhere, every day. Using a peer-reviewed methodology, it lets us answer the question, how much more likely is this temperature at this location at this time of year because of climate change compared to what would naturally be happening? So, for example, when I downloaded this yesterday, big swaths of the whole world, North America, South America, Africa, Europe, and Asia, were experiencing much warmer temperatures because of climate change, at least 5 times more likely because of climate change that would naturally have been occurring. You can put into the search location box on the tool any of, I think it's roughly 10,000 different locations globally, and then it will drop a pin that shows you that location and highlights the climate shift index for that day. So a few days ago when I did this for Cambridge, Maryland, climate change was making that temperature at this time of year in Cambridge 3 times more likely than it naturally would have been. Real-time climate alert system continually keeps an eye on weather and other conditions throughout the United States. And then when something out of the ordinary is happening, not necessarily super extreme, but just unusual, sends a personalized alert when that's happening to the individual in that area. And here's what it looks like. It's a simple email with a very few lines of text pegged to something happening now in your location, plus a graphic that's pulled out of the other tools I've been talking about and links to more information. So we invite and strongly encourage you all to sign up to receive the Climate Matters bulletins and real-time climate alerts. There's this form on our website, which this QR code will take you to. Ignore the term media. This is a sign-up form for all climate communicators, including you. And then we also have a major program on sea level rise, which has itself offers several different tools, and I'll mention each of them briefly. The Coastal Risk Screening tool shows you areas that are at risk of flooding from 2030 all the way up to 2150. It's an interactive page, so if you change the settings, you will be able to go just look at sea level rise, or sea level rise with an annual flood, or with a decadal flood, or with a century flood. You can pick your pollution scenario, very, very strong limits on pollution, or business as usual, no limits at all. Luck, medium, meaning almost all the climate models produce a range of outcomes depending on how the variables line up. The default in this is kind of the average condition, but you can change that to be either a lot of good luck and things don't proceed that fast, or some not so good luck and Mother Nature really has it in for us, and several other variables as well. You can also click on the Choose Map button up here and view any of a number of different kinds of maps, including not just year, which is what we were just talking about, but also water level, as well as particular types of long-term temperature and so forth. On the water level map, the user can select anything down from under a foot up, actually I forget, I think it's 30 feet. You can put it in feet or meters, and you are able to see what gets wet in this location. This is a Google Map platform, so like with every other Google Map, you can pan and zoom and so forth. By the way, this tool, unlike most of the others that I've shown you, is actually available worldwide. The Climate Matters program focuses on the United States. The real-time climate alerts focus on the United States. The climate shift index is also global, as you saw from the global map. So is the coastal risk screening tool. Risk Finder is another US-focused tool. It compiles about 100 different, mostly federal databases that the user selects a location, 6 feet Maryland, and a water height, and lets you see who gets wet where. I do want to mention that portions of this are in the midst of being updated. For example, we are still feeding in the 2020 census. So the data that are in here from the 2010 census, the new version we do expect to have up by the end of this year or very early next. It has a number of demographic breakdowns in it to see various categories of individuals and people of color. It also provides a number of ways to look at the data in terms of types of buildings, like schools and hospitals and houses of worship, and infrastructure like roads and airports and railroads and so forth. Contamination risks from Superfund sites and others, and land, which means things like parks and so forth. Another component in the flood risk site lets you see how many homes are at risk of coastal flooding by various types. So for example, this one we've selected 2050, and we're looking at Maryland by county. As with most of the other components in Risk Finder, you are able to click on the click on the little button, and it will download this information as a spreadsheet or as a graphic. And there are a number of different places within Maryland that you can look by counties, by coastal codes, congressional districts, state senate and assembly districts, and so forth. Picturing our future is a very different kind of a tool. Here what we've done is taken a bunch of photorealistic imagery and shown the difference between what happens when in the long term allow 1.5 degrees of warming versus, which is the international target, versus the trajectory we're now on, which is a lot closer to 3 degrees. We've got about 190 locations for things all over the planet, including in Baltimore, the Convention Center. So this is what it looks like now. On a multi-century basis, after 1.5 degrees of warming, you start to get some water over here. And after 3 degrees of warming, you've got a new wading pool at the Convention Center. And finally, Flood Vision is a custom designed vehicle top instrument package that we created. It combines highly precise cameras, LiDAR, which measures elevation, and GPS, feeds all that data as it drives along into a computer on board. And it collects about 1 terabyte of data every day that it's driving. It then uses AI processing techniques that produce very high resolution 3D reconstructions of the environment, and then uses cloud computing and AI to render extremely photorealistic, highly accurate floodwaters. So for example, in downtown Annapolis, you see something at a famous street corner here. And here's what it would look like if there was a major flood. Presumably the people would move. I want to end by mentioning another powerful free tool that's very helpful to climate communicators. This one's not from Climate Central. It's from our colleagues at Yale and the Yale Program of Climate Communication. Since 2008, they've been polling a representative cross-section of Americans to hear their views on climate change every 6 months. Then they downscale those results to every state and every county in the nation. You can click here to see the full list of the questions that they've been asking, which is about beliefs, perceptions about risk, what policies people support, and what behaviors they engage in. And the reason this is such a neat tool is they've set it up so that you can specify a location, either by state or by county, and then you can select which of those question responses you want in a fact sheet, and then click on a button, and you get this nice, well-organized sheet. So again, in closing, I'm going to invite and encourage you to sign up for the Climate Matters bulletins and real-time climate alerts. And I'm more than happy to take questions. Jennifer, I don't know if I'm calling on people or
Sure, you can.
Jennifer has her hands up.
Okay, great. So first of all, I love your work. I get your newsletter. I've been following it and I've been sending it to Susan constantly. So having you as a speaker for my first meeting is just a delight. I am very much following the public opinion research and a lot of your sort of sister organizations. And as a commission, we are supposed to get to a 60% reduction in greenhouse gases and all kinds of problems. So we have a really, you know, Maryland has legislatively the most ambitious goals of any state in the country. And the only way we're going to get to those goals is if people change behaviors. For example, they need to put electric things into their homes and change to electric cars and maybe do solar and maybe eat less red meat. And there's a lot of things that are behavioral that will take communications campaigns to convince them to do. So you're very good at letting people know exactly what the threat is and making it very specific, which I think is going to help us a lot as a commission around sort of zoning rules and around construction, you know, and building things. But I wondered if you could comment, because we don't have a budget or a plan yet for how we're going to convince the public for these behavioral changes that we need them to make very quickly. I wondered if you could give us ideas, organization strategies, and even ideas about budget and operationalize, you know, that kind of very large scale behavioral change.
Yeah, great questions. They're a little outside of the scope of Climate Central's specific mission as a communications organization that provides sort of help or materials to others. But I will say that I am familiar with some groups that I think have, because we don't recommend individual behavior changes. It's part of our being non-policy, non-partisan, non-technology. Which is very important to the work that we do with the media, because then we're regarded much more as a partner than as a source that's pushing a particular agenda. At any rate, in response to your question, however, I can say that there are a number of other organizations doing some very, very good work to help advance the kind of behavioral changes that you are mentioning. One of them is Rewiring America. I don't know, are you familiar with them already?
Yeah.
And they have, I think, some extremely interesting and useful materials, especially on heat pumps, which is one of the first things that it's going to make sense for many individuals to do. There are also other organizations that are involved in helping find grant funding for helping make sure that folks like the commission are aware of the funding opportunities that are available both to state and local governments, but also to many of the NGOs and nonprofits that would be able to, you know, put, and taxpayers for that matter, that were able to put solar panels on their roofs and take, you know, get electric vehicle credits, et cetera. I think one of the most important tasks is actually, and something that we're starting to figure out how we can actually help with this, is just to inform people of the tax credits that are made available through the 1 year and 1 day old Inflation Reduction Act that was signed into law a year ago yesterday. I'm happy to follow. I am blanking on the exact URL. Some of those, the Department of Energy has a lot of material up on its site, which you're probably familiar with, but if not, I'm visualizing the web page, its URL off the top of my head, and I'm happy to send that along later.
Have you seen states put together climate communications budgets? And if so, what are you seeing them put into those budgets?
That's a great question, and the answer is no, I have not. More of our work is directly with media than so far with state entities, but that is a direction that we're moving more in. And again, I think part of it is we do need to be communicating on the impacts, but we need to closely pair those with the solutions information, because you don't want to be in a situation where it's just bad news, bad news, bad news, tuning it out. You have to say big problem and here's something you can do. And those messages need to be paired. So I haven't seen any specific budgets on that, but conceptually, I think that's the important thing to do, is to put those two things together. Susan.
Our recommendation for this year's budget, the governor's budget, and to the General Assembly was to ask for, what did we ask for, 5 million? Amy, Jabari, do you remember? I don't know. We asked for money for a communications campaign for the commission, and we didn't get anything. So we were hoping we would get something.
Donald?
Actually, I'm sorry. Laura was first.
Laura's
You know,
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Laura.
No, I had my hand up, took it down, putting it back up. This is how it's going to go today. Apologize. Karen, thank you for this wealth of information. It was a little bit too much because I was so excited about absorbing every slide that I just got into the weeds very quickly. I'm wondering that I'm a data geek, so this is really amazing. Can you help me remember, if you already shared it, or help me understand if there's opportunities to take, for example, the sea level rise graphs? Can you overlay those with things like BIPOC communities or disadvantaged communities? Are there opportunities to overlay data sets so that we can start prioritizing some of this work?
We do have, I mean, it is not, you can't do that through our site. We are making some of our materials available through Esri if you have Esri access. We also do, and the new version of Risk Finder that I was mentioning is going to be integrated with the maps, and that will contain more of the social vulnerability kinds of layering that you're talking about. We do have a layer currently in there that allows you to view affordable housing risks from sea level rise. But so that was one of the maps on that little drop down that I mentioned.
Thank you. One other quick question. So I worked at the National Aquarium and it was underwater in your picture, so we know it, but it's always hard to see. But there was one, it wasn't a sea level rise, maybe the flooding, it was a flooding map?
Flood risk
Anyway.
finder.
Flood vision, maybe, I don't know. Either way, is that flood, is the data going into that map only sea level rise, or is it also, we get these horrible storm events that are causing rivers to flood? Is it all of the above?
It is storm surge as well as sea level rise on the maps, yes.
Okay.
And then on the photorealistic imagery and flood vision, the user can select the scenario and the height of the flood. Or that interface actually isn't public yet. We are still developing it, but the user will be able to determine that.
So I'm not necessarily talking about coastal flooding. I'm talking about inland flooding when there's glacier melting in, inland Alaska, and they're getting crazy floods.
No, unfortunately, we don't we only have coastal.
Okay.
We have a great deal of interest in inland flooding, but as of yet, we have not been able to incorporate that.
You have a tremendous amount of data and I'm excited to deal with it. I was just curious. Thank you very
By
much.
the way, I meant to say this at the outset, I am going to be sending along a PDF of these slides, so that I should have said that so you weren't trying to grab names, but you'll be able to see all of the material. Donald?
Thank you so much for the work of you and your team. I actually used the Picturing Our Future site maybe 3 or 4 months ago to find some images for a presentation for teachers that we're engaged with, and we sort of combined that with some other climate technology tools. And I didn't know about all of the other resources, so thank you first and foremost. Along those lines, does anyone on your team or yourself provide professional development for like teachers or students to essentially do what we did today, but dive into some of the tools to utilize them? Or are there tutorials that we can share with folks?
Yeah, there is a video. Well, first of all, if there's a chunk of people, I'm happy to do for them what I just did for you all, and just walk people through them. There are video tutorials specifically for the Risk Finder tool. And is this true? I believe there are also some for there are some for the coastal risk screening tool, the maps. There really isn't one for the Climate Matters materials, but that's actually a really good idea. We should create one. Yeah. But as I say, if there's a group, one of the things we really want to do is, because we were originally creating most of the Climate Matters materials were for media, but then somebody pointed out to us, this stuff is incredibly helpful, not just to media, but also to NGOs and to teachers and to government folks. So we're expanding our outreach and engagement there, such as through today's discussion.
Donald
I don't
or
know whether,
Jabari. Oh, I'm sorry.
go ahead, Susan.
Donald or Jabari, do you want to tell Karen about what we did this year and how we want to improve it for next year? And that's why you're asking that question.
Sure, I don't mind. Now, I see Amy's hand up, and because I think that may be the next part anyway, Susan. So that would be perfect. Amy, did you want to ask a question or say something really quick, and then I can mention that to Ms. Florini?
Well, my question was just, I mean, you have a ton of data and forecasting. Where is all the data that you're assembling coming from, and what models are you using for the forecasting? I'm just curious.
Yeah, every Climate Matters bulletin specifies the methodology because the data sets are different or specific to that particular thing. If you go on, for example, it's in every one of our tools. We're very transparent about that. So if you look, for example, at the coastal risk screening tool map, there's a little box in there on the left hand menu that says details and limitations. And then there's several pages worth that goes really deep into, I mean, first it provides an overview, but then it goes deep into all of that. And in fact, one of the interactive components of that is also, you can choose which model you want to use. So you can choose the IPCC sort of base model. You can choose the IPCC reasonable worst case. You can choose a NOAA one, et cetera. I think there are 5 or 6 that are in there. So we usually would select as a default the thing that we think is the most appropriate default, but then allow users to use different approaches as well.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I
See
think
Jeff's hand up?
Question, yeah.
Hello, thank you very much. I think that was an excellent slideshow, and I'm glad to hear that there will be a link to it. Or pardon me, you'll have PDF there on the ECO webpage. One thing I noticed is that now, is it Climate Central exactly that put together this the resources for weather to make it available for weather media personalities to be able to use? Is that what has? Am I understanding that correctly?
That was the initial focus of the Climate Matters program. And then we've expanded, that was 12 years ago. We've expanded it considerably ever since then. So now
Well,
it is used not just,
if I-
not in the, sorry.
All right. Well, if well, fine. I would have to suggest that the report seems to be in the location from Maryland. You've got Hagerstown, you've got Salisbury, and you've got Baltimore as where the information is targeted for. If I may suggest, it would seem like if you put it in Cecil County, you're surrounded by Virginia, rural Virginia, West Virginia, and also the western part of Pennsylvania. And your materials would be directly be able to be applied to those areas. And much like Voice of America, this would provide accurate climate change info to voters that are kept in the dark by the news media in those locations.
Well, we have those locations too. Just for purposes of this presentation, I pulled all the examples out of the three media markets, the three specific media markets in Maryland, which happen to be Hagerstown, Salisbury, and Baltimore. There are, obviously there are parts of Maryland that fall into media markets of other states. It's just the way the media markets are set up. So yes, we actually cover the entirety of the United States. But again, because I was speaking to the Maryland Committee, I wanted to use Maryland examples.
One last thing. I remember in C-SPAN they had an interview with a weather broadcaster, and this gentleman tried to apply your type of information to his audience in Iowa, and he had to move out after receiving death threats to he and his family. So
yeah, that was one very, very isolated incident. We actually know this individual well. These materials have been widely used. The Climate Central materials the Climate Matters materials are used on the air 7,000 to 8,000 times annually every year. And this just does not, this story got a lot of pickup because it was a man bites dog story, but it's about that unusual. It is not at all the normal occurrence.
I want to compliment your organization. When I was up in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, a extended or a family member came to me and asked where could they find accurate information, and I referenced Climate Central. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Great to hear that. And I think Jennifer has her hand up.
Yes, I wanted to ask if you have gotten yourself invited to all the major insurance conferences and all of the conferences around zoning, and if you could speak about that. And I also, Karen, you may not be aware of this, but we have a controller who is extremely focused on climate issues. And as she is looking at our investment portfolio, one of the things she is looking at is whether our state is putting our pension funds at risk by investing in REITs, real estate investment trusts, that are in states where they're having difficulty getting insurance. And so we may change our investment portfolio based on some of those issues. So I wondered if you could speak to the insurability and the zoning issues surrounding your maps.
The maps display the data. They are available to anyone in the whole world. We do, for commercial entities, we will sell them the underlying data sets. And we have in fact done that with certain insurers who've requested them. I think you're absolutely spot on that insurability is going to become a bigger and bigger and bigger issue. And I will mention something that I didn't cover in the overview, which was just about a year ago, we released a report that looked at tax parcel implications and took for all the coastal areas of the country, there's a state-specific definition of private land and the boundary to public waters. And as seas come up, some of what used to be private land is now going to be below that. And there are going to be major policy implications because one suspects that some of those landowners are not going to be excited about continuing to pay property taxes on land that is now below that boundary line. Not only because they can't use it, but it's not even clear that they would legally own it. This is a big thicket of issues that are going to have to get untangled as seas rise. I'm not talking here about annual flooding. I'm talking about permanent inundation as seas rise. We have some time to figure this out because the sea level is expected to accelerate starting in the middle of the century as opposed to next year. But it is starting to happen already, and it is certainly exacerbating the storm surges, which are themselves exacerbated by climate change.
If I can ask a second question. So as you're doing these wonderful maps, I'm wondering if you have considered doing maps about electrical issues. So for example, in Hawaii, they chose not to turn off the power because they had no way to keep their water systems or their hospitals going if they turned off their power. Now, Los Angeles this weekend is expecting similar levels of wind. Does Los Angeles turn off all of their electricity this weekend or not? Have you looked at mapping electrical vulnerabilities during different weather events?
That's an excellent question. We could integrate we can map the presence of it. I don't know that we're likely to be able to find a data set that allows us to distinguish between hardened and non-hardened infrastructure, which is, I think, what the question you're asking really goes to. It's an excellent question. I'm not aware of such a data set existing. Doesn't mean there isn't one. It's just that we have not come across it as yet.
Mm-hmm.
I know the committee has other business that it needs to discuss. I'm happy to keep going with discussion, but I'm also happy to shut up and go away so you can have the rest of your meeting if that's appropriate at this time.
You've been great, Ms. Marini. You've given us a lot of information, and this, as you can tell, this is a very hot topic for us. We love this. I think the graphs are great because they're so user friendly and they're very easy. Let me say that way, easy to understand. So I could definitely see how this could be a tool for pretty much any citizen. If there are any other questions, I think if we can put them in the chat this time, because we do have to move on. But Ms. Rainey, I think you might have opened up a can of worms because we're going to want you to speak to some of our groups at some point. And I can actually say that even here at Bowie State, I mean, this is a topic that we really don't talk much about. It's the media portion of climate change and actually seeing, these pictures and these graphs and whatnot. This is something very intriguing to students. And I'm sure, Donald, he works with the primary schools, I guess you could say it that way. And I'm sure those students would be interested as well. So I'm going to try to look for opportunity for you to come here if you are willing to do that.
I live in Washington, DC, so it's easy for me
Okay.
to, and my parents actually live in Mitchellville, so it's easy for me to get out there.
Okay, yeah. Well, we know we're in Bowie. So I can see this being for science majors, communications, graphic design. I'm not sure all the titles of the majors and everything, but I can feel like there's so many different majors that can actually incorporate this. So with that being said, if you could stick around so I can kind of explain to you the next event that Susan kind of alluded to earlier, and this may be something that we could actually, have your assistance with as well. And that's actually going to be also a segue into the next part of our agenda. So if you don't mind sticking around for a few more minutes, Ms. Rainey, that would be great. But did want to go ahead into the Maryland Climate Teach-In and just let you know, Ms. Rainey and others in the group who may not be aware, I won't give too much background for interest of time, but we did our own version of the worldwide Climate Teach-In event. So we decided to have our own efforts here for Maryland. So we actually called the Maryland Climate Teach-In. We did pretty well for our first time, especially considering we got off to a late start, with promotion and all that. So we had about 24 events that were recorded for us total, but about half of those were from one place, and that was Towson University, because they had already really been doing this. They had made it more of a larger effort, and they actually, sent the information to us, so we were able to record it. But it was still a good start. But one of the things that we're looking at is trying to have speakers available for different classes. And we're talking about classes in school, we're talking about classes in community centers, anything, all levels from K through 12 to college to adult. So this is one of the things I think, Susan, you're kind of saying this might be a good way to a good resource for you to even speak to that, or someone from your organization to speak to us about that as well. And Donald, if you have opportunity, do you have any updates on teacher outreach as well? I think you're supposed to reach out to some of the educators.
Yeah, so we have been continuing conversations with Chesapeake Bay Foundation. We may have talked about that before. We held a teacher course or professional learning experience for about 18 teachers in July. And so we'll be able to continue updating everyone. That's not just in Prince George's County. Chesapeake Bay Foundation has worked in other counties to hold those meetings as well. And then on the climate change action plan side within our system, we're gearing up for, this is why I posed the question before, a climate change workshop series. And so we're looking to have one probably in November or December. So we'll be reaching out to organizations like yours that want to get in front of a large group of teachers for an evening, for a block of time, to showcase climate change technology, climate change lessons, anything that they can use to integrate within their lessons.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
that definitely sounds interesting. I do, it's easy for me to do Zoom or what are we on? Google.
Mhm.
I am somewhat constrained just, because it takes a lot more time to go someplace than to just do the talk. But certainly a large group of teachers is an audience I would be more than happy to address.
Right, and it would be presented virtually. We've
Okay,
also
even
started
easier.
inviting students to even some of our teacher professional development sessions. So you probably have a combination of teachers, students, and then we can offer, since it is virtual, seats for folks throughout the state as well.
Great.
And Ms. Brady, I did have one question I meant to ask. It relates to the bulletins and alerts. How often do those come out? Is that something we can actually customize on our end?
Well, actually, one other point that I had intended to include, all our materials are available for free for you to reproduce. You don't need to ask for permission. there's actually a thing at the bottom of our website that it says terms, and it makes clear that any nonprofit or even a for-profit educational institution and any nonprofit or for-profit news media are welcome to use all of our materials for however they want. To answer your specific question, the Climate Matters Bulletin comes out every week, usually on Wednesday. The real-time climate alerts don't come out on a regular schedule because they depend on Mother Nature doing something interesting.
Mhm.
And so you can't exactly predict that in advance.
Okay. That's the answer I was looking for. Thank you. Thanks so much. And just to wrap up my part real quick, I do want to see, do we have any volunteers to be a part of the subcommittee for the Maryland Teach-In? We're going to start earlier this year so that we can try to go ahead and get more, more participation. And last year, I mean, the subcommittee we had last year was great. I would love to have all of you back. Susan, Amy, Donald, Jessica. Am I missing anybody? I am missing somebody. I can't think who it is right now.
Maybe Anthony
No, I think it was
or Jim.
no, stars. Her name is Trish. Trish, sorry. Yeah. So if there's anybody else who would love to join the subcommittee, please let me know. You can, if you want, because we have to move on, you can put in the chat, just say yes, I would like to be a part of this. It's not a lot of work, but there is some commitment to it because we really want this to be a big event for Maryland, and hopefully it'll branch off to other states and across the nation. So
Tristan was one who helped from DNR.
Tristan, yes, thank you.
Are you thinking of doing it, Jabari? You were the chair this year, sort of our group. Are we going to do it for the whole month or for Earth Week, or it's around Earth Day?
Right.
That's when it happens.
I think, and that's something we can discuss further in the group. I think probably the whole month, honestly, because nowadays the framing is almost April being Earth Month. It used to be just Earth Day, then it kind of became Earth Week, but now, I'm hearing the term Earth Month more and more. So I think it could be events throughout the month. Now, how much we are a part of that, we can kind of limit, our role in that, but I think it should be throughout the whole month, honestly. Yeah, good question. I saw your message, Jessica, so you're on board. Amy, I think this might be a good segue for you too with the Speakers Bureau, if you want to go ahead and talk about that real quick. And just let everybody know, we realize we're coming to 4 o'clock. If you are able to stay maybe a few extra minutes, please give us a few minutes. We won't take too much time, but Amy, I'll turn over to you.
Well, and if necessary, because we need to open up for public comment as well, we can punt the Speakers Bureau to next time. I'd like to put out food for thought to folks though, so you can come to the next meeting kind of prepared. So what we really need to do with the Speakers Bureau is try to identify the types of topics that we would like to have someone available to speak on, and then we can work with the chairs of the various committees to identify who is the best person. So maybe we want someone that is available to talk about infrastructure or electrification, and then we can, if we figure out the topics and what we think will be of interest at conferences or in educational programs, then we can build the Speakers Bureau around those topics and have bios available for them and make sure that we're reaching out to institutions to let them know they're available. So that's really the next step for the Speakers Bureau. Folks are welcome to also email me directly with ideas, and I'm writing your note down, Jennifer. We are keeping the speakers to commissioners or working group members right now, but the working groups are expanding dramatically. So that's where the Speakers Bureau is. And since it's 3:56, maybe we just want to open for a public comment.
I think we heard from our one member of the public, Jeff.
Anything else? Anything, Jeff?
Well, I thank you very much. What kind of response are you getting from the commission itself? Are they, I don't believe any of those principals have shown any interest in communicating about climate change. Now, have they?
Well, not true, if I may answer that. It's not true, but they are in their own lanes, which are very intense, like in the adaptation resilience working group and the science working group. They are cranking out reports and things. We are going to do webinars for some of the working groups, those included, and at least a couple of times a member of I think the mitigation working group has spoken at conferences at our request, at this group's request.
Well, and keep in mind that, we did make, and it was included in last year's annual report, a recommendation for a large scale communication program that involved a website development, media placement. I mean, a very significant media advertising campaign. But the cost for that has to be approved at the legislative level. I mean, these are big programs and they are very costly. So we are recommending, and the commissioners welcomed that recommendation, but we can't necessarily move that forward without the legislative approval for the cost.
Yeah.
It's a significant program.
Why, thank you very much. Well, at least I thought I'd ask why there seems to be an absence of emphasis on communicating. We definitely are behind the 8 ball, and I appreciate your efforts. Wish we were further along, and that the messages was about climate change and individual actions would be, or the appreciation for individual actions to restrain the carbon emissions would be available at each and every transaction where energy is bought in our Maryland economy. All right, that's my suggestion.
I just realized there's another important organization that I should mention to you who specifically focuses on helping frame things around individual behavior changes, which is called RARE, RARE. And they have a lot of experience doing this more for sort of ecological things, but now they're very much focusing on the US and climate. So Jennifer, I don't know whether should I email? I can introduce the two of you if you would find that helpful. Okay, I'll do that. Great. And I do have another call now, so I need to hop off, but thank you so much for letting me join you today. I really appreciate the opportunity. And Susan, I'm going to go ahead and make a PDF and pop that right over to you.
Thank you so much, Karen. It was a wonderful presentation, and can't thank you enough.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Jennifer put in the chat, please send me the plan that was submitted last time. It's included on the Maryland Climate Change Commission on Climate Change annual report, which is on our website. It's linked on our website. It was last year.
I can plug that in here.
You want to plug that? Can you plug that link in? I was like going out to get, there it is. I got it.
Okay.
Because we just have to have it on. So here's the link directly to the report. Our recommendation is very early in the recommendation section. I think it's on the first page. It's page 9 of the document, or page 11 of the PDF. And basically we made, two recommendations, but specifically the recommendation for a large scale campaign was included. We did have a dollar value in the draft, but that was, we decided to leaves that out in the final. So there is no necessarily dollar value associated with it. And I think that covers it for today. So next meeting is when, Susan? October, should have this pulled up, but I don't already. Should be October. There it is. Our next meeting is on October 19th at 3 p.m. So I hope you all join us, and we will talk more about the Speakers Bureau then, as well as the webinar series. So thank you all today. Have a good one.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.